Hello. Today is March 1st, 2022. I cannot believe it. And here we are without mask. May the world go on and forward in a better way. My name is Roz Dimon, D-I-M-O-N. And I'll just say a few words about myself and Karen LaFleur, who I am interviewing today as part of the Techspressionism interview series. In a short word or two about me, this whole story of being digital has been a total accident for me. My paintings, oil paintings, filled up with pixels when I was in New York City. After 10 years of paintings that filled with pixels, I had to go to something else, and I was in the forefront of digital media, taking courses at the the School of Visual Arts, and it's all been quite a ride since then. But enough about me. I want to talk to you a little about Karen LaFleur, fascinating artist who's part of our group, Techspressionism. And I'm just going to say a few words about her, and then we're just going to let Karen share her screen and tell us about her journey. Karen LaFleur is a digital artist, a writer, and an animator. She combines traditional drawing and painting techniques with digital renderings and computer animation. A common theme in her artwork is the concept of resiliency, the interplay between interior and exterior worlds. Her artworks exhibit nationally, including the Renwick Gallery of the Smithsonian Institute, Washington, D.C., Cape Museum of Art in Massachusetts, and the Hammond Museum in New York, the Union Square, San Francisco, and she can be found in private collections worldwide. Oh, and if I didn't mention it, Karen is joining us today from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Welcome, Karen. It's great to be with you.
It's a delight to be here with you, Roz, and to show everybody what I do, and to be part of the Techspressionist group.
That's great. And Karen and I know each other through the Techspressionism salons that are every 2 weeks, which are open to other people. And that's been a really interesting thing, hasn't it, to be part of those salons?
It's been a wonderful community of people who are doing so many different things in Techspressionism, all different types of digital art, and yet we all have the same sensibility, like we found our people that understand the challenges and be able to express the joys of working with the computer.
Right, I agree. Colin Goldberg really has made a wonderful open platform for us to all share. And of course, we have a show coming up that we're both in, the Techspressionism show that will be opening close to where I live in the Hamptons, in Southampton. That's going to be a very exciting show. So looking forward to that. I'm glad that you will be in it, and I will be in it as well. We do have other questions here as part of our interview process, but I think I'll just let you share, Karen. We talked about that because that, our art is how we tell our journey, but we want to just cover your background, maybe remember to talk about what made you become an artist, or like you said, you had no choice. I think you said that. Love that. A little about your influences, and then we'll talk a little at the end about Techspressionism in the future, but just go for it. I may interrupt once in a while if I have a question, if that's okay.
I think that's fine. And I think it's great for the audience to be able to see what I'm doing too, as I'm talking about my backgrounds and things. So absolutely. Let me go and share my screen and bring up my lecture screen. Can you see that? Great.
Excellent.
So Roz asked me in a way, when did you know you were an artist? Is one of the questions they ask. And I said to her, with my first breath. And it's true, because it's really how I have seen the world right from the very beginning. And so my artwork in general speaks to the resiliency of the human heart to survive in ever-shifting landscapes. And I do that by exploring the interplay between interior and exterior worlds with a focus on adaptability. And a lot of this comes from voice, where we have thoughts in our head, and yet we're a social human being and we're speaking out loud. And it's sort of that interior world and exterior world that picks up in my artwork in all different forms. but it stems from this duality.
Has that
So
always been evident to you from the beginning that that's where you were going, or did it take you a while to figure out what you're doing?
Right from the beginning, right from the very, very beginning. I mean, well before 6 years old.
Oh,
In the very last slide, I'll show you some of these little twig and stone villages and communities I used to build as a young child on the beach. And I'd put them in the marsh grass, and I just leave them there for people to find and wonder, what was this community? Where did it come from? So this is a lot earlier. So I was already working with this duality right from the beginning. So when I talk about my work, I start with me. And I'm a writer as well as a visual artist. So let's start. Me. Look, there are pictures and stories inside my hands. That's nice, dear, everyone said. Just don't forget to wash them before dinner.
yeah.
But I didn't wash away the pictures and stories. And they're still inside my hands, even today. All these pieces, if you're curious, were all done on the computer. And when I'm working on the computer, I don't use any paint programs. It's strictly Photoshop, the trackpad and mouse.
Quick question, Karen. Were we looking at 3 different pieces, or is that all one triptych, or are they
3 different pieces to show the range of what can be accomplished?
Wow, yeah.
So we start at the beginning. I'm from the Boston area, really very, very, very close to the city. I mean, I could see it. It was 10 minutes right there is my horizon. So in the winters, I was in the city. In the summers, I was on the island. And the ocean left a huge impression on me as a young child because of the freedom, and also the freedom to explore the microcosms. The ocean is so changeable on a moment's notice. One tidal pool will have one community in the morning, and it'll have a different one in the afternoon. And so on the right side of this slide, you'll see these little nurse figures. And the other big influence for me was my health, because right from the very beginning, I had a severe heart condition, and we were literally waiting for the heart-lung machine to develop. So I'm an experimental case coming through in the early 60s when they did the surgery. So I had this sci-fi world that I would be in for months at a time in the hospital. And then I would have this amazing freedom when I came home at the ocean. So there were like these 2 worlds, the duality again happening.
Yeah, that really explains the interior and exterior and psychological experience when you were young.
Yes, yes. And when I was in the hospital, it wasn't all doom and gloom. You were still being children. And so we would empower ourselves to be children, because back in the 50s, this is the early 50s, we're talking about, we didn't have therapy dogs or social workers. We were given a deck of cards and a pad of paper and a pencil, and no television, no nothing. So we learned to be children in the middle of chaos, difficult chaos. And I found the community to be extraordinarily empathetic and amazing observers of people. If you weren't feeling well, someone would lean against you while you were playing cards until the pain passed, and then they just lean away. And we were all under 6 years old. So this left a huge impression in terms of observation. Text and image. Right from the very beginning, I always was putting text and image in my work. I'm not signing this. My name is part of the picture. It's part of the community and these small microcosms that I ran into at the beach. I would go into imaginary ones when I was back in my little drawing pad at home. I was also writing stories. But if you notice, the words disappear because I'm extraordinarily dyslexic and I can't read. In fact, I can't read more than 3 pages per hour until I was in my late 30s. And yes, creatively decided to do a master's in English literature to study children's literature from text to image.
Wow.
I was like, okay.
But you were already writing, even though reading is difficult, was writing a different.
Yes.
Ball of wax, yeah, uh-huh.
It was always story. It was always story driven behind the art. The words were too hard to get out. And
Yeah.
so that when I went and did the master's, what happened is I was photocopying the material I needed because I just had a little library here on the island that didn't have interlibrary loan. And I found out that by photocopying a page, I could read 30 pages an hour. If you hand me a book, I can only do 3.
And why is that again? Can you say that again?
I think it's because of the tracking and dyslexia. Dyslexia is a timing issue because there's no area in the brain for us to read. It's a man-made construct reading. It's not a biological construct. So we use this part of our brain and this and this and this and this, and we're firing it off in a bazillion times per second. And dyslexics, sometimes the firing doesn't happen. So you can get a lot of different anomalies.
How did having a copy of the page be, how is it different than reading from a book?
Flat.
Oh,
No curvature to the page.
Oh, I didn't get that. Oh, I see. That's important. Yeah.
It is. And a lot of dyslexics have other reversal issues or whatever, but this tracking was my main issue. So when they came up again, technology is chasing me through this whole lecture in terms of opening up more doors for me with my health issues, even though, you know, I'm advancing as an artist, the health issues are getting worse in some areas, but the technology would come along and catch me and save me and push me forward again.
Oh, wow.
So when the tablets came out, it was like, thank you.
Well, there's so many geniuses who are dyslexic, so I don't know.
Well, it has nothing to do with intellect. It's a timing issue.
Right.
So I'll try to go along a little quickly here. This is high school work. So I'm working on my drafting and my drawing abilities, observation abilities, and I'm still putting text and image in things. And I didn't really recognize this till a lot later, maybe like I was in my 20s and I went through some old work and went, huh, you know, I've been doing this my whole life.
Wow.
Trying to build another world with living inhabitants to tell their stories, even if it's an abandoned village in the marsh grass, it still tells a story of who was there, their footprint. So by the time I get to college, okay, I can draw. Now what? And this is and as you know, it's a pre-digital age. There's no internet, there's no anything. And you're doing drawing, sculpture, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but I want these things to move. So what happened was I had to take a sculpture class. So I took a ceramic class, but naturally I'm not doing plates and teacups. I start building marionettes. My characters are starting to come alive. And they're built a little article in a little dusty library on how to build traditional European puppets, the big ones that are in Vienna that are about 3 feet high. So these are all built in the classic form in high fire stoneware.
And is this one that we're looking at 3 feet high?
Yes, she's about 32 inches. She's a little under 3 feet.
Oh. You know, it's funny when you start to see an artist, I'm just interrupting a second, but because I have looked at your work and from the very first slide, there's some patterning and stuff as part of you. And that's evident even here in the puppets.
Yes, yes. Right now I'm trying to work on 3D gesture. And in this particular puppet, her eyes are closed in a big sort of squinting smile. But in reality, it's the eyes that sort of suck you into the internal character. And so for this particular one, I was trying to work on movement, but there are others with their eyes open that you'll see that come along. Meanwhile, we're kind of outside of New York. My husband and I are sort of, he's an artist too, brilliant artist, and we're headed to the city. We're now like in our early 20s. We send out, you know, information on our artwork, and we get a call back from a letter back from a major gallery in New York, and they say, hey, you get your stuff close to New York, we really want to see it. And of course we're dancing, we're like, yay, this couldn't be better. And then 24, 48 hours later, we get a phone call and they told us my husband had 30 days to live, and I was 3 days away from having my son. So we side tripped back to the island.
Wow.
And when life, go ahead.
Life always has a way of interrupting art. It's a real bummer, isn't it?
It is in a way, but it also makes you extraordinarily creative.
Of course.
You,
And
you just don't give up. So it's like, you know, a tragedy on one level, but on the other level, it's made me the artist I am today. So
absolutely, of course.
here we are back at the ocean, my muse, and what are we going to do? Because he needs a transplant. This is going to be a long haul. They're barely doing transplants at the time. You know, in fact, he spent 17 years on dialysis through all of this. He did for 30 years, he was with us. So what are we going to do? We're artists. So we bought this little house, literally 20 by 23.
Now, hold on, I have to back up. They gave him 30 days to live, but then he lived 30 years.
Yes.
Oh, well, there's the nice surprises.
It's just wonderful. And the medical community just, they kept him going, you know? And again, he came forward with technology and I came forward with technology, because if we were born 10 years earlier, we wouldn't be here. So we're
Nice
actually
story.
technological creations, my husband and I. So we bought this teeny little house. It was pre-1770. It had about a 20 by 23 foot footprint, little teeny thing, fixer upper. And we put this room on the back of it. And we created our own art world. If we couldn't have an art world in New York, we were still going to do it. And it was really, Roz, one of the best things that could have happened to us.
And you're in the Cape now, right? I just want to help our audience who'll be listening to this. But you're back in the Cape, and yeah, so they can figure out where you are.
Yeah, Cape Cod, because there's a lot of capes in the world, but they call it Cape Cod in the islands, and everybody here calls it the islands. So I'm doing local speak. But we had this little house, and what happened is millions of people would come here in the summer. And they would come in, and again, no internet or anything. So this was their experience to art. And we just love putting our stuff out there and responding with our audience, seeing how they reacted, having these wonderful conversations with them. My husband was a found object sculptor as I was doing my figurative work. And I think I might have told you before, but we would have customers that came to the Cape once every 10 years. And we'd come home from a trip to the hospital, and on our front step, literally, this is true, there's a tractor seat. And from Idaho, they drove all the way out here with this tractor seat to give to us because they had been in our gallery 10 years earlier. And this just a wonderful exchange between audience and artist. So it was a sideways trip, but it was a good trip.
And that would be something that your husband would put in his found object kind of sculpture, right? More than you.
Well, this is the other thing about living in this era as an artist. You did everything. You fixed the mower wheel,
So it wasn't necessarily for art. It was just giving you something you might need when the person left the tractor seat?
No, they left the tractor seat for his found object sculpture.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I had to take that slide out. We had a full sort of little mini junkyard in the back of the studio, which is behind the wall that you're looking at straight ahead. But no, to keep the gallery going, we made clothing, we made jewelry, we made, fixed the lawnmower wheel. We worked with a lot of designers. We worked with doing Bloomingdale's windows. They would call up artists in that day and say, hey, we need 45 porcelain hands for the windows in New York, which we did. And then we'd ship it all down to them.
Wow.
So it kept us going in terms of financials. We didn't sell one thing, we did many things. So these are the figures that I was working with at the time. And these were my studios. Two little ones, clay studio. All the faces in these are hand built. I didn't use molds. And I would make many things. So, if we had one doll, I made 12. Because
are they made out of fabric or plaster or wood or what?
Fabric with armatures, aluminum armature wire rigging, porcelain faces, hands, extremities, antique glass eyes. I used to work with a company in New York that had a collection from 1900 to 1910. There were 4 dolls in the late 1800s. So they were just really beautiful eyes.
Mm.
I'm trying to move it along because we don't get through this stage, we won't get to the end stage. But these are the things that I was building at the time. A lot of these sometimes were almost in installation tableaus in the gallery, almost like little mini theater productions.
Right.
Here's one of the sculptures.
Is that you?
That's me.
Of course it is. I want to be sure though. I'm just helping our audience know what we're looking at. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's great. Now that's a pretty large piece that you're standing next to.
Some of them are large. Some of them, they ran between 20 inches and 3.5 feet. And we sold this all the time. People really responded to art. It's much different than it is today.
Did you guys show other work, or were you really a gallery of 2 and you did everything? Like
We did
magical
everything.
Kingdom of 2.
Wow. It was a
Wow.
kingdom of 2 because of our health. We couldn't, I mean, sometimes we were open for 3 weeks, and then if there was an emergency, which there were many, we chased the ambulance to Boston and or got police escort, and then we were up there for a while, and then we'd come back and open up again. So we couldn't do that to other artists.
I see. What a special relationship and story this is.
Here's some of the other ones, and I'm still working with puppetry, as you see on the left. Her hair is all fine copper wire. So this has nothing to do with the beach, where every gallery on Cape Cod, well, not every, but many of them were selling the picture of the beach, the picket fence, the cottage. And then there was us and a few other galleries. And it just became a wonderful audience that we ended up collecting.
Oh, that's fun.
You wouldn't think it would be, but it was. I'm also doing paintings, I'm doing sculptures, and this piece I put in because it's actually not one painting. What I was doing was painting individual shapes and then assembling collages from them. So it's almost like a precursor to using layers in Photoshop.
Yeah, very much. And it moves backward and forward a little in a way that, that feels like layering, which is such a word these days, in the new dimension we're in.
Yeah, like the eyes are all cut out of the circles out of it, and then they're all put together to make one piece. And this is around like the early 80s, so like 81, 82. And like I said, I was working with a lot of designers. So this one is like the theater set, the little stuffed Christmas ornament in the upper left actually goes with that Christmas tree in the center, so the Boston Ballet. And they had a Christmas tree that went from normal size to like 30 feet high, and all my ornaments were on it. So we would work with set designers. I was also working for a museum in their collections departments for 4 or 5 years. And during that time, through them, I cataloged a collection of a Hans Hofmann student of 6,000 pieces over 2 years. So I learned a lot about how to provenance your own artwork along the way.
Very important.
Very important. But I never gave up the story and the image through all of it.
Did working with Hans Hofmann and his collection have any influence on you, or not so much?
It wasn't Hans Hofmann, it was a student of Hans Hofmann.
Okay, okay.
So did it influence my work? No, it gave me more of an idea of how to, like I said, provenance an artwork, and realize that the artwork has a history beyond you just creating it, which is an important lesson in my 30s and 40s to realize.
And it's a big deal now with NFTs, if we can get beyond it all being about the currency itself, but giving provenance to a piece that's totally digitally created. But I don't want to get off track. Yeah,
that'd be difficult. Somebody's going to come up with a solution, though. They have to.
Hold on, I got to get my barking Yorkie. 1 second.
That's okay.
Come here, little badness. Come here. Yes. This is how you know our interviews are live, folks.
Yes, and I have the tea.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but
oh no. So anyways, I'm still trying to do the text in the image. These are the drawings that I was doing. This is charcoal. I'd paint with India ink and different sheared layers, rubbed in graphite. But about this time, this is probably my mid 30s now. I started to lose my eyesight so that I can't really focus on these details anymore. And so I didn't really draw for 4 or 5 years until technology sort of came into the picture. And then I could blow things up big and actually get back to the visuals. But that little hiatus
Wonderful.
again.
I love how you're telling us your story in that way and how technology was helpful to you in those ways.
Absolutely. Because having this little hiatus away from the drawing and still making stuff for the gallery and the designers, but it gave me a chance to write. You know, that I got that. So I had the writing for 3 or 4 years, and then the visual came back with technology. So here we go digitally. I started in 1981. I bought the computer because I thought it would help me with my dyslexia, and I thought it would help with the business forums and things. And at the time, there were no computer stores. So I would go to the big trade shows up in Boston because that was a business I could get in. And the guy who sold this my first computer to me said, "Lady, you got 128K. You're never going to need any more memory." I'm like, well, I sort of blew that out of the picture real fast. But once I got a hold of the machine, I knew it was going places.
What was your first computer, if I may ask? I started on an Amiga a year or two after that.
An Apple IIe.
Apple IIe, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been Apple the whole way. That's another story we won't get into, but I'll tell you later. So in the beginning, I'm just testing the machine to see how far I can push to get back to my drawings. And so this is literally matrix dot printer, because the trouble with the machines was, yeah, it's great on the screen. What do I do with it? You know that I can't get it off.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Where do I go with this period of time? So eventually it gets going up close enough that it's getting real close that I can actually start to say, yeah, I can start to sketch on this machine and have the freedom to work. But I'm chasing the story. So I decided to do a master's in children's literature in Boston. It's a premier program up there. It's wonderful. And it's really not about children. It's about the text, and it's about literature. So this was a wonderful experience for me to go through. And they were extraordinarily supportive with my husband. You know, if he was sick halfway through the class, they'd say, go home, take care, come back, you can do it next semester. They were very, very good. But going through that experience, I realized, so what if I want to get this to press? Because back then, as you know, there were no pre-flighting software. You could make this picture and now what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we took pictures off the screen with a catch the burglar 7-Eleven camera.
Exactly.
And then would take it to Dugal in New York. And it was a whole different ball game then.
It was, and I'm on an island and there's no place to go with this. So
yes.
I end up, after doing the master's, I did a certificate in computer graphics at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design in Provenance,
Wonderful.
Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And this is how they traditionally trained you to mock up a piece going to press, which now a lot of this is built into the programs, but it taught me exactly how things have to be, the attention of the detail that needed to be done. So when I was doing this, we're talking maybe early 90s now. The piece on the right is Illustrator. And then everybody goes, yeah, it's Illustrator. I said, yeah, but it's Illustrator 1.0. And it didn't shade anything. So this piece, all the shading is done by me in bazillions of little layers. Mm. Then I did a third degree in a master's in illustration from Syracuse that was for studying the visual back to the text. First one was the text to the visual. This was visual back to the text. And now I can draw on the computer with my little mouse the way I could before. This whole journey. So this whole journey took about 10 years to get to this point.
I see.
And now it becomes, where are you going to go with these visual stories? Where is the technology going to take you next? So I'm starting to break down the story in terms of how to push it across the page. And then I started writing sudden fictions. And this is one of my sudden fictions. I hope the sound will work. Put it way up. Give me a thumbs up if it works, Roz.
It's
okay?
a very compelling image. Very interesting.
Thank you. And it's a key important piece for me to start the next phase of this journey.
I do not count the years since my disappearance. To do so erodes what little footing I have in this ancient land. And yet, in truth, what is a year? Without measurement, time still passes. I've learned that at least, if nothing else. To survive, I try not to think of home. I live by the idea that one cannot miss what one cannot recall. But more often than not, I break my own rule. A night sound, or just a half stage before sleep, just a fraction of a second. That's all it takes, and my thoughts skip back to a former life. Rain on a night drive, red light waiting for green, windshield wipers flicking back, forth, and the scatter of fallen leaves across wet pavement. Strange what the soul remembers.
Beautiful. Nice
you.
words. I like the words. I'm a big reader as well, so I appreciate this.
Thank you. It's an integral part of every piece that you're going to see from now on. You may not see the words, but they're all driven by stories. And this is a really important piece for me because it's playing with the dualities again. When you first see it, you say, oh, a mythic character. But by the time you get to the story, you realize, no, this is a modern character caught in mythology. It totally flips the whole thing on its head. And there's a lot of different dualities in this that, you know, I could teach for 15 minutes, but we need to move on. But it is a key piece that started this whole genre going into sudden fictions. I say sudden fictions, which is now probably equates to flash fiction. Back then, there was no name for it. But for me, it's a story around 700 words or less. It takes place in a single setting with a brief time span and contains a limited number of characters, one, maybe two. But most importantly, it speaks with immediacy. Like you and I are having coffee together. I'm going to tell you this story right now. It professes an uneasy familiarity so that you're like, yeah, I get this. I get where this is going. But it ends up on the brink of revelation. It doesn't really tell you, and I lived happily ever after. It's the reader that has to bring that epiphany to the piece, and it's done in very short form. So this is what you can do with 113 words.
The little box had a finial on my mother's age-worn hutch, a cloisonne with red roses and hollyhocks, shimmery clear like melted candy drops picked off the tip of your tongue and held to the light, a delicacy on silver legs. My mother's treasured possession, the one she kept out of childhood reach, but never out of view. Oh no, never out of view. The only spot of color in an otherwise gray room with no curtains, 2 chairs, and a floor mat covered with dirt from too many feet and not enough time. I laid the little box in my mother's hand. She smiled. I think. At least that's what I'd like to believe.
So with this background, realize everything is being driven by these stories. I did a collection called Night Driving. It's women's voices. And I started to pull apart the story. These are the internal stories we tell ourselves versus the outer world, you know, your mom, your wife, or whatever that you have to deal with is still this internal person. So that's what this collection was about. This one here on the outside. And
quick question. Were you showing is the audio part of the piece, or when you think of are you just sharing the background of the audio, or is that something that you would share if you were showing these pieces?
Only if I'm doing the animations now, but back then there was no access to animation. These are just digital prints. But when I gave a lecture, because I'm dyslexic and I can't read my own writing, well, I would record them, and this started me on this whole journey of putting, wait a minute, I can put my voice in my artwork.
Thank you. That helps. That helps.
And then my gallery was open, you got to realize, at the same time, and we would have to do the Christmas fair for a week for the town or whatever. And all the businesses had to come up with something, so-and-so hired a harp player, somebody else did, Christmas decorating for ornaments for the kids. And what I put out every year are a collection of doll houses that we built. They were just architectural models. And I would run these videos. I made videos out of these and ran them in the back room, and people would be able to hear them spoken that way. So it's sort of like my beginning of getting into animation.
Mm-hmm.
So this piece was important to me because in the frame around the edge, the story's pulled apart, and that's literally the story that's outside. The story inside in the brown area is very rigid and straight, and that's the internal voice of this particular character. The theme is the fear of saying yes to love. So all this is going on side, but there's this fear holding this character like this. I also, in this story, put interior stories, so you can read it by color. So if you chose the pink text, it would read, "To mark its passage, only the tiniest of flake drifts in December." And you'd have these other little stories inside the story. So I'm playing again with pushing the story apart. This is Ella Jean. She's about teenage love being wiser than the parents, actually, because the parents are dysfunctional. And this is about motherhood and the loss of identity, and yet retaining identity. And she's literally courting a little superhero in a cereal bowl.
How large is this?
They were running probably 22 by 28. And I would sell these in the gallery constantly.
And they're all digitally created on Photoshop.
Digitally created, yes.
Now we are at 10 of 3. I don't mean to hurry us, but I want you to be thinking about, we definitely want to see what you're doing now. So You know how many slides you have here, but I'm just putting that in there.
So how much more time do you think we have, Roz? Because I
think maybe 15 minutes.
Let's unshare the screen, because everybody has, this lecture was built for a different audience, for a classroom. So let me just go back into here. And I want to undo this. Okay. So I will start right here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It's all fascinating. We try to keep them to an hour because people's attention span, and of course we want to get to your, your more recent work as well. So
I'm not sure I did this right. Let me close this. I want to play sliding window. There we go. Oops, wrong screen. Hang on, guys. Okay, so pull it forward a whole bunch of time, and I'm still writing, and I'm still doing text and image. And I end up back on the island. And now where is my muse? And my muse becomes the ocean that I started with. So I start a series called A Diary of a Tidal Pool. And I began to realize that story could be pulled apart just visually and abstractly. So I would visit this tidal pool every now and then, and I would get these different impressions and then just come home and do a painting. I never did a sketch, or I never did a photograph. And then I started doing landscapes.
Now, are these multi-layered, or do you just do one layer, or how do you work your process?
Hundreds and hundreds of layers on Photoshop.
It has a real, there's something interesting about this because it really speaks to the medium you're working with a lot.
Yes. This one here, before the pandemic, is called What the Sun Said to the Moon. So again, there's all stories behind these. And now the pandemic's here, and this one is In the Shadow of Jupiter. And I'll just quickly go through these. Again, they're just landscapes. And
Do you work from looking at something, or do you work with photography, or do you just totally pull it out of your mind and
out of
start?
my mind, totally out of my mind, Maura.
Yeah. Well, all artists are a little bit, you have to be.
Well, there was a series I did after I did the night driving series that were fairy tales. And I started to take that beast picture that you saw, and I would find very, very early fairy tales, like pre-Grimm. And I would read them and I'd put them aside, and then I'd just write whatever happened. It might be a love story, a mystery, whatever. And so I got in this habit of taking the impression of what I just experienced and bringing that back to the studio rather than sketches or a photograph.
How long do you work on a piece like one of these, if you can share that?
Maybe a week. If it's an animation, it's longer, definitely longer. And then I did an exhibit of this whole series with the title pool in my stories. I think there were 52 pieces in this exhibit. That'll give you an idea of the scale. These are my animations that I'm working on right now. There was a series that I did month by month as we were sheltering in place.
These are wonderful.
And this one should run for you. Oh, there we go. Is that working for you? Is my
Yes.
internet a little, yeah. And this one here is based on healing. So there's sort of this normal beginning of fracturing apart and then healing back together again, but in a different way.
And this is during COVID?
Yes.
Yeah. Fascinating. What are you using to animate?
Photoshop for my artwork. I do my artwork on vellum and pencil, then it goes into Photoshop. From there, it's broken down into the layers. And from there, it goes into Motion, Apple Motion. And then it goes into Final Cut Pro by Apple. And that's the end of that one there. And so these are stills of other animations that I've done.
They're very lush and full.
Thank you. I'm still writing. This is a series that came from misfiring neurotransmitters because of my hands. And I said, oh, what does that look like? And it got me to think back to this experience that I talked about earlier. So I started to write these stories down, and they're really just a celebration of childhood and life. So for those stories, I'm developing characters that will be probably in a book. I don't think this will be an animation. But again, it's all that flat puppetry. They're all jointed so that they could animate.
Now, is this older or this one's new as well?
I work on multiple projects at the same time. So all these are in development right now.
I see, yes.
And then I'm working on a project since the beginning of the pandemic. I take 4 photos per day on my cell phone of whatever detail I can find. And it's a very meditative and mindfully present moment of my day. It takes 10 minutes. And then this is what I'm building out of them.
Nice.
And this will be an exhibit online in a 3D gallery eventually.
Do these have stories too, or are they more exercises?
This is more of an exercise in observation. So it harkens back to that whole early experience.
And do you design them in Photoshop for a certain size? How big are these?
Probably about 25 by 25 inches square. And I'm also working on animating and rotating the cubes, which has been an experience.
And do you work in 300 DPI or a little lower? Yeah.
Yeah. It's the most comfortable DPI because it's big enough to give the detail and blow it up. if it was printed or on screen,
Totally.
but at the same time, it isn't bogging the machine down.
Right.
And I'm working on a solo right now, a homage back to the ocean. I'll be coming up in July. And it's sort of taking that tidal pool experience, but now it's the whole ocean. So I want to go into those,
This is
the-
nice.
the
Like
trench
this.
where those vents come and all the life down there and things like that. So these are all my test studies. There'll be animations and still artwork. This is an animation.
You ever think about doing a movie or film or you know, I know you have a lot going on, but these things, they seem to be getting more lush and more full, and all of your things are coming together, which is exciting to see.
And this would be a still image. So that's what I do, text, image, and the same voice, this interior exterior world that I've been chasing since a kid.
Well,
But
that was a
thanks to technology, it's getting me further and further into these other worlds that I can create.
very fascinating. Can you talk to us a little bit? Do you have more? Should we get back to should we unshare for a minute, or do you want to talk while the slide is up? I wanted to ask you a little bit, like, you know, what interests you about Techspressionism? Thank you for sharing. That was a wonderful journey.
You're welcome. Well, like I said in the very beginning, all this that you've seen, this whole transition, I mean, it's been a lifetime. And I would say only in the last, say, 15 to 20 years, that digital art is really sort of slowly coming into its own. So to find people in Techspressionism that are all doing these amazing things around the world, I mean, I'm fascinated by how people are using technology and being creative in our group. So for me, finding Techspressionism not only gives it a label to the artwork, and we go back to that Provenance, you know, experience, like I have something to call this, but I'm also linking with people around the world who are eager for the same thing. So really
Yes,
happy to be in the group.
Oh, yes, it has been quite an experience. I agree. And you may have already answered this in a way, but how do you see the future of art? If you could say a few words about that.
We've always done it and we'll always do it. You know, even if we only have a stick and sand, we'll do something. But I do see it going more digital, and I do see it opening up huge horizons for digital artists coming forward, especially with the younger generations that are so in tune with the machine. I mean, they're doing stuff that's kind of like, really?
I agree. I totally agree. It's fascinating to watch, and I do think we also have to tie to our history to give a real sort of resonance to what we come from. But at the same time, it's like any revolution. It's going to change the financial way we do art. It changes the way we collaborate with art. I mean, look at us. We talk on a salon with 30 other artists every 2 weeks, and we may have more going on with them than the artists in our own neighborhood. So, you know, the metaverse has arrived, and I love what you just said, because it's still all about art and emotions and sharing and connecting with others.
Absolutely. So I think that human need is driving the technology to find itself, you know, the community around it.
I agree. Well,
nice.
listen, this has been wonderful, and I'll see you at the next salon.
Perfect. Thank you for the screen share.